Hi, I'm Jenna Lewis.
And I am Roshel Richard.
And we were both raised in fundamentalist churches and are since questioning and deconstruction.
Yeah. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about where we started, where we currently are, and I guess kind of look forward to what this channel's going to sound like and what we're going to talk about. So I'm Roshel Richard. I grew up very, very, very strictly Pentecostal. I'm talking like skirts down to the knees, like.
See, when I met you, I don't think you wore skirts.
No, I didn't. My mom did though.
Oh, your mom still does.
She does, but she also wears pants now too. So the last probably like 5-10 years, she's kind of branched out a little bit more. But for a long time, she would only wear skirts. Like like at home, sometimes she'd wear pants like in the yard, but like in public, I don't care what the occasion is, she's gonna throw on a skirt every time. And I think for a while they made my older sister, when they first got into the church, my older sister could only wear skirts. It's funny because she also talked about how they would only let her wear granny panties for so long. Like that's it.
Oh my gosh, it's great.
Yeah, because they're like, you have to be modest, which I don't understand what that has. Nonetheless,
we'll get to another time.
Yeah, another time for another day. So I grew up going to like a strict Pentecostal church. Mm-hmm. And then around like my teen years, I started going to like another church, which was still like pretty like
Jesus-y.
Yeah, very strong on Jesus, you know.
Very strong on Jesus. I love that.
Not as charismatic as the Pentecostal church, but you know, still
and
very,
so that's
very Christian.
That's where I met you.
Yes, and that's where we met. We met at that church.
And so how old were you when you started going there?
So I started going there when I was like a little kid in like their Kids Alive program at like the elementary school. Yeah. And then I just would go, like I didn't really go very much like growing up. Once I became a teenager, my parents started letting me like branch out. I went back to that church.
Got it.
Yeah. But, and my parents were kind of like, oh, if you want to just go there, you can just go there. But like, we want you to come back here on Sunday. So my home church, the Pentecostal church, the church service started at 11:30. So my parents would let me go to the other church for the first part of their morning service. And then I would have to come back and go back to
home
my
church
parents' church.
Is such like a Christian term though. Like home.
I feel like that's also like Southern Baptist, like, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so every Sunday I did that back and forth going from this church to that church for probably like 10 years.
Double
easily.
Dose.
Yeah.
I do remember like when we were at the same church, like you almost never went to lunch with us. We used to go to lunch all the time. Mm-hmm. And you almost never went.
Because it was like, that was my parents' like deal with me. It's like, you can go, but you got to come back to go here. Because it's a family church, you know?
Right.
And so they're like, you know, you be with your family, whatever. But they never discouraged me from going to the other church. They just always wanted to make sure that I was going to come back to that church. Yeah. But I would say most of my, I feel like saying trauma is such a triggering word, but a lot of my like church trauma comes from the Pentecostal church. And to this day, like, you know, 34 years old, making my own decisions about my life, I still feel so much guilt. Yeah. Just from like things that have been instilled in me from like a kid, as far as like going to church or whatever. Same. So that's where I am now. So it's my parents' church. It's my family church. So I still go occasionally. My daughter loves to go.
Your dad is now the pastor, right?
No, my grandpa's still the pastor. He's still my dad's the co-pastor though. Oh, okay. And so they kind of alternate preaching on certain Sundays. So I like to go when my dad preaches. But yeah, so my daughter loves to go. So I like to take her, but cautiously, because I know you can't protect your kids from everything, but if there's things that you know that bee's gonna sting them, like we're just not gonna go by the beehive. I get it. Yeah. And that's kind of where I am. So I struggle like. I
feel like you also try and keep your kids, like obviously everybody's gonna have their own trauma, like from something, right? But like you kind of don't want your kids to have the same trauma you did. Yeah. Because you're like, okay, you might find a new trauma and everything, but like at least I know what this trauma is like, and we'll explore your new trauma in therapy
like,
later.
Let me help you with that trauma. Like you know, like I know how much like hurt and shame and pain was like behind just growing up in the Pentecostal church. Yeah. And like looking back, I I look now and I see people that are still like really deep in to that religion, and it's just like it's like crazy to me that like I was there, you know?
Yeah.
It's wild.
Same. I think the craziest thing for me is seeing people like you and I have mutual friends that have stayed in that lifestyle, and like seeing them when I like know the struggles that they had as teenagers or like young adults, and then I look back and being like, oh my, I'm like I was this close to being them.
Yeah, like
and
that was almost me.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my god, like is that what I sounded like when I was there?
Yeah,
like,
I think about that too.
I don't know if you do this, but I always go to my Facebook memories. And I go through, I cringe, but I don't just delete them.
Oh,
yeah.
Like we're done
I check every day.
Done.
And every time there's something that's like, if you just press into Jesus, like I'm like, oh God, I go and hit delete.
You're like Jen from 2013. What were you doing?
Oh my God, yeah. I'm like, no. Yeah, I don't know what I was doing back then. Who knows? Yeah. So I grew up. I feel like I'm such a hodgepodge. So whatever first church, and I use that term very lightly, I was in, I really think it was more of like what you would see documentaries now on cults.
Oh dang!
Like we can deep dive into it later, but there was a lot of like sexual abuse happening with the kids, and there was a lot of almost not secrecy, but there was never new people. Like, it was not bring your friend on down like you see in a typical... Yeah. It was like 12 families, and that's it.
Yeah, that's odd.
Never anybody new. Never anybody left. And the weird part is, as adults, we've all kind of fringely asked our parents about it or kind of made comments, and they won't even say anything about it. And so, not say anything, but they kind of, like, for example, I remember one time when I was a teenager... I said the church's name. I was like, oh, is that cult? Like, I said I was all mad at my parents, and their response was, well, it wasn't exactly a cult.
No.
Was the response I got.
Response.
And so then I'm like, so part of me is like, I don't even want to know, because like I know all the other shit. I'm like, I don't even want to know if you guys knew what was going on. Like, yeah. I think I would just rather not know. Like it, because like if I knew like, oh, my parents knew what was going on and didn't go to the cops or didn't whatever, I don't think I could ever even speak to them again. So I'm just don't want to know.
Yeah.
So that was my first church experience. But we left there very early. The whole church got shut down. Don't know exactly why. And now, but the weird part is where I'm kind of like, was there like some sort of raid or something? Because not only did we had church in this like house, but it was not anyone's house. It was like the building of the church. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it was like a house. And whenever the church got disbanded, the city demolished the house. Like they didn't even sell it or anything.
Yeah,
no, they demolished it, and now it's a parking lot. So I'm just like, that's kind of weird,
it's a
right?
Sketchy, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's not just me, but so that was my first experience or whatever. But so that was very culty. And then we went kind of opposite extreme as it goes in churches. Not in life, but in churches. We went to this mega church, had thousands and thousands of people, and the only reason we even went there was because my dad got a job there. My dad was a guitar player, just for reference. So he got a job on stage as like a background guitar player or something like that. So we went there for only like 2 years, and then he got because he was kind of a background player, which there's that's fine and everything, but my dad is very musically talented, and somehow he got connected. I don't know how. The church that you and I met at, somehow he got connected to there. And they offered him a worship leader spot. And so they offered him as like a guest worship leader first. And so we went there for like a few weeks. And then they hired him there. So essentially, money booked us to different places. But yeah, so then he got hired as a worship pastor there. And then he's still there. So he's still there. He's still on stage. And that was when I was, I think, 8. I think I was in 3rd grade. Maybe. Yeah. So, and I was there at that church. I was there from when I was 8 until I was, I don't even know, 2000. I think the end of 2014. 14 or 15.
Yeah.
But I like went on to work at that church also, and it was just, that's a whole.
I feel like it could be a whole conversation to talk about the things that happen behind the closed doors.
Probably because you're like too, you know.
Yeah.
That would be. We should do something on that. It's just there's. And how much the people, I think, leading from the front don't practice what they preach.
Exactly.
Like
how much stuff they cover up and like.
Yeah, exactly. And, I know you and I were talking about like before we started doing this, and it's just kind of like, looking back now at like a more objective lens, I guess, is you look back and see like, like, not just why wasn't something done about this, like, in general, but there's many legal things that you and I have been, like, the police should have been involved. Like, why was this not reported? Like, and so, or making villains out of children for abuse. Yeah. And it's just, it's insane.
And I think a lot of it is, like, we let the Lord judge him. The Lord will deal with him. Yeah, that's always the Lord will deal with him.
The Lord will deal with them.
Which, I mean, I don't doubt that will. I know we have different views about like where we are as far as like Christianity goes, but I don't doubt that like I'm a firm believer in what goes around comes around. Mm-hmm. So like I don't doubt that what you reap you will sow, but like I don't think that it's like the right thing to do when you see some abuse happening to be like to cover it up so much and be like, well, the Lord's gonna judge him. Like no.
Or they repented and now it's fine.
Yeah. Oh, that's
they have a repentant heart.
Like that's between them and the Lord.
Yes. And then them being like, well, if there wasn't such repentance, like.
Yeah, making excuses for terrible behavior.
What? And you see this stuff now in the news with like the Duggars, right?
Oh,
like Josh Duggar and abused his own sisters. Parents knew, police knew, nothing was done, and they said, well, he repented and he was in counseling with our pastor.
He went
like,
to
okay,
camp.
Your
make him better.
Pastor is not a counselor, okay? Like. Anyways, that's also another subject because I think, Christian counseling, if you will, is also very detrimental to people. So, I firmly believe that unless you are trained, if you happen to be in a church and you're a trained like psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever, or even a licensed therapist or a licensed counselor, like that's one thing, but people in churches are somehow like deemed with this like ability to counsel people,
and I mean, and I feel like
experience,
and I feel like maybe some of it's like, oh, you talk to your girlfriends about XYZ, we'll talk to a neutral party, but a lot of the times
even about the neutral party thing.
But even in their like opinion, a lot of times they'll be like, well, I think it's no, this isn't about like what you think, this is like what's going to be the best for me in my situation. No, I think they can't be objective.
Exactly. I mean, like, for example, like, I'll just give a tiny example because it definitely needs, like, a much larger deep dive. But I had severe depression as a teenager. I was cutting my wrists. I was, like, carving. Like, I was into all sorts of shit. My parent did not go to a licensed therapist, did not go to a doctor, did not go to anyone. They went to the fucking pastor. Like, they went to the youth pastor at the time. And had me sit down with them. Well, of course, I'm going to say whatever they want me to get me out of there, right?
Yeah.
So I just cried, I'm so sorry, and like, whatever. And that was it. That was the end of it. So I just got better at hiding it. Like, and then I find out as an adult, when I'm like talking to an actual therapist, they're like therapy session 1, they're like, you need to be on antidepressants. And I'm like, no, I'm not depressed. I'm just like, just having like this and that. And then if you've ever done any sort of mental health therapy, they have you fill out those questionnaires right before you start. And everything I went to 4 different therapists because I did not believe, like, I'm like, no, y'all are just trying to push drugs on me. Like, that's what I thought. And at the 4th one, at the first session, they're like, you need to be on antidepressants. And I'm like, what?
Like, I'm not the problem.
What in my questionnaire is like making me so depressed? So I don't know. But, antidepressants are the best thing that ever happened to me.
Your life.
Changed my life. And I could have been on them since a teenager. And even, so in the last therapist, the 4th therapist that I actually ended up believing, she told me, she was like, you give me your family, your history. She's like, it sounds like you've had this, you've probably been depressed since puberty. And I'm like, sounds about right.
You're like, that feels accurate.
Checks out. and she's just like, anyways, but that's just an example of like, why are we going to, I'm taking us on a tangent, but.
No, that's.
Yeah. So, okay. So where are you right now?
Yeah.
As far as with your faith or your whatever, like what do you think you're right now?
Yeah. So I still believe that I'm a Christian. Like I believe in God. Mm-hmm. I think that in which I use Christianity a little loosely because I feel like what like real Christians like deep in the church are making it out to be. That's not what I think. So I feel like I'm kind of living my life off of like, so I'll read the Bible and interpret it like how I interpret it, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And like I'm just living off of my convictions. Like if I could feel convicted doing something, then it's probably like not the right thing to do.
So what does that mean to you?
I feel like my beliefs are definitely like I would consider myself like a Christian. I guess I use that term loosely because I mean, I feel like I just kind of go off of my convictions. Like if I'm doing something and I feel like I shouldn't be doing this, or like if I feel like this is gonna hurt someone else intentionally, then I feel like it's just not something I should be doing. And that's kind of how I'm like basing my decisions. And I think that's how I'm gonna teach like my daughter too. I feel like the Bible is a good guideline. I think the hard part for me is growing up the way I grew up and like the interpretation of the Bible being interpreted like picking and choosing little things that we like here and there. That's just not realistic. You can't do that. It's either all of it or none of it. If that's the case, then I'm gonna, abide by this rule, but not that one,
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I am now. Like reading the Bible, trying to interpret it, but really just like making decisions and living off of my convictions.
And convictions for you mean like your good gut feeling.
Yeah, my gut feeling.
So I'm just curious. So if you're saying like all of it or none of it, like for you, right? So how do you reconcile, and I think over the few weeks of us doing this, I'll probably convince you to just say none of it. but I'm saying, so like, how do you reconcile things that you don't agree with? If you're saying all of it or none of it and there are things you disagree with.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like...
Or is that what you're still
figuring
out?
But that's the thing. I feel like, do I disagree with it or do I disagree with, like, how someone else's interpretation of this? You know what I mean? Okay. Like, maybe, like, thou shalt not kill, like, period. So one person can be like, thou shalt not kill animals. The next person, thou shalt not kill people. You know what I mean? So, for me, it's more so just, like, taking it more of, like, as literal word. And then, like I said, just, like... applying it as far as like how I feel convicted about it.
That makes sense.
So maybe I'm more spiritual versus like just straight Christian or religious, I feel like maybe I've just become more spiritual and like listening to, that little voice in the back of your head when you're making decisions about things.
Like conscience.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get that. I think that will change, but I respect whatever you want to believe, but I think for me, like I definitely don't call myself Christian anymore. I personally don't like. I don't necessarily say like, okay, the Bible's all lies. That's not what I'm saying, but I wouldn't use it personally as like a guide for my life because of lots of reasons, which we can dive into at some point. Like lots of reasons, largely because there's so many contradictions and I always heard growing up people like non-Christians saying that, like, oh, the Bible contradicts itself. But then in church, every time I would hear like kind of how those contradictions are reconciled. But now that I'm no longer in that like community, I guess, for lack of a better term, that lifestyle there, that's better.
Lifestyle,
okay.
Yeah.
Now that I'm no longer in that lifestyle and I can look more objectively, I'm like, wait, like, no, this is not reconcilable. And I think a lot of it's just like fucking glossed over.
Yeah.
But then it kind of goes back to like, it kind of also goes back to like, I don't agree with large parts of it. And I don't believe that even if I know, okay, the Christian terms we always heard about the Bible, that it was God inspired, right? I don't know if you heard like God inspired, like through man, but it's God's word. That's like what the explanation I always got. And I'm just like, you can't say, there's no account for human error in that, I guess is my point. And there's also no account for documented instances we have of it being tampered with. Like, being rewritten by the Catholic Church, or you know, like a lot of these like discrepancies, or it not actually, you know, I watched this one YouTuber at one point, and if I can remember or find who it is, I can put it in the description, but that was literally taking verses like we grew up on and taking it back to the original like text, and not in English, right? Well, I think it wasn't in Hebrew either. It was in, I think, Greek first, or Latin. It was one of those. I think it was Greek, but which is also unusual if it was from a Hebrew. Like, why was it not the point? Anyways, so all that to say though, it was like, even what we have now, the King James version, which is what at least I was always told was like the most accurate. Yeah, it wasn't the same, and so I'm like, how can you? And then, but what I think is just interesting is that so many sermons that I heard growing up hinged not just on, this is generically like what's being said. It hinged on, notice how they don't say him, he says we. Yeah. There. Or, you know what I mean? It's like all word is the whole fucking sermon. And it's about like the way in which the sentence, they didn't use this phrase, they used this phrase, which, and I'm just like, but it's so inaccurate. Like, even if you want to say the Bible was 100% real and accurate when it was written, the version we have now is not that. So it's just like, I'm just saying, so like, that's for me. Like, anyways, so like, I would personally, I keep going on tangents, but I personally don't, like I said, I don't believe that the Bible is like an inherent word of God, I guess. And I don't believe in, like, I wouldn't call myself a Christian, but I also wouldn't call myself an atheist. So I don't say like, oh, there's definitely no God, or there's no, I don't know. Like, I think that part I'm still kind of like working out, like, what, if I know what I don't believe, okay, great. But like, what do I believe? Yeah. And so, like, I think a lot of like what my whole, not life, but a lot of like my own personal journey has been like figuring out like, what do I think about X, Y, and Z? Yeah. Like, what evidence is there? What is this like harmful? Is this not harmful? Or all like kind of context around like unpacking things that you grew up with and figuring out like what I personally think without anyone else's or any religion's like influence. Yeah. If that makes sense. So I think that's like where I'm at right now. So I'd probably like be in almost like the agnostic category. But I think I'm still in the category of like, I'm not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say like all of Christianity is wrong. Yeah. Like, I don't know that I'm ready to, I don't think I'm in a place that I'm ready to say that. I just think large amounts of it are wrong. Yeah. Or inaccurate or incorrect or just immoral. So I think that's where I'm at now. That's not really a great explanation.
Well, I wish that growing up, I had more access to like other religions. Right. Yeah. Because my parents are pretty strict about us like going to other churches. Not that I feel like, as, you know, an 8-year-old, I can make a decision about what religion I want to be. But I do feel like if there was that transparency and there wasn't such a strict like, oh, we don't go there, you know, we don't believe like they believe, then I feel like maybe as an adult, I would be able to make a more informed decision about like where I stand. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because now I feel like I'm 34 trying to figure this out. And I have a 4-year-old that like is going to need some direction, you know? Right. Yeah. And so I really struggle with like being at this place in my life so late in life and like having this 4-year-old look up to me and wanting some direction. Yeah. And all I can like, you know, all I can offer her is what I know, you know?
Right. No, I think you're completely right. And I think that's like, I'm in the same situation, not exactly the same, but like, you know, I have, you know, 5 and 8-year-olds that they originally grew up, like they originally were in church. You know, both of them were born while I was, I think my youngest was also born when, so no, she was not born when I was working in church. So only my oldest was. But, so my oldest remembers some of going to church, and not much, but she remembers a little bit. But my youngest, she's a little heathen. She doesn't know. She never really went to church. But it's like, what are you there? They ask a lot of questions. Like, I swear, the most inquisitive children on the planet. Oh, well, how are CDs made? Like, what the fuck, dude? I don't know. All right, go look. That's what YouTube is for. All right, I got you kids YouTube. Go discover. No, anyways, but yeah. So it's like, but they're asked questions like all the time, and I know the questions are coming. Like, oh, well, like what happens when you die, and why does my friends say this was wrong, or there's just like, and you also have to guide them through just like life in general, and I don't know, it's I think it's really, really hard. And for us, when I say us, like our family, we've kind of used kindness as our meter for everything. If something you do or say doesn't like a ripple effect into kindness, like, so that's like kind of what we've defaulted to. Like, oh, was that kind to say, or was that kind to hear even, like, and so it's kind of like showing the other side too. So we do everything pretty much in our house around kindness. And I know a big question that people try and pose is saying like, oh, without Christianity, there is no moral gauge, right? And I just don't think that's true, because there was morality before Christianity existed, right? And before any religion existed, there was a form of morality. And for me, the answer to that question, because that was a really hard question for me when people are like, well, how do you gauge what is right and what is wrong if you don't have Christianity? And for me, that, like, my answer to that is kindness. Like, okay, why don't we murder? Because it's not fucking kind to the person getting murdered. Like, why don't we lie? And and then it also goes back to, like, I was told, liars go to hell. That's what I always heard. Like, that's the only sin that was listed with the homosexuals. It was the liars. And I don't know if your parents ever told you that, but my parents told me that all the time. It's the only sin that God listed with murderers and homosexuals. It was liars. So, in retrospect, is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But, and not the point, but like lying is a big deal, right? And, Satan is the father of lies and, all these things. But you know what? I don't think now as an adult, all lying is not wrong. You know what? It's just not. Like, I think malicious lies are wrong, right? Because malicious, you're talking about you're doing something to be unkind, right? Yeah. Lying to your parents, that's wrong. Like, I get lying to, like, I get that. But you know what? Lying to your child in certain circumstances, because we're also like, I'm kind of talking in circles with that, like, we always tell our kids, like, we don't lie to you, and we don't. But you kind of like white lie some things, or like, oh, we'll talk about that later, or well, you know what I mean? And so it's just like, or like my daughter will sometimes ask, my oldest will say, like, about Santa or something, like, oh, is Santa real? And I will always ask her, like, do you want to know the real answer to that? Or what do you want me to do here? Like, and she will always answer me, no, that's okay.
Lie to me.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, so, and
yeah, but like, who's to gauge that? Because now we have to have a whole nother system in place to gauge like which lies you're okay to tell your kids.
But I think it's like,
but okay, I definitely see what you're saying.
But lying in some situations helps protect your safety. Like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, lying, telling a guy that's approaching you in a parking lot that you're meeting a friend.
So, funny story. So my grandmother, we were sitting around her house, like, it must have been Thanksgiving or something. We were just sitting around, and she's a little grumpy. And she's like, if anyone ever tried to like catch me in a dark alley and rape me, I'm gonna tell them I have AIDS. And so, yes,
that's got dark really quick.
Literally what she said.
Oh my god.
And so we're all like, what? This is the pastor's wife saying this, and she's like, yeah, I'm gonna tell them that. Then they'll leave me alone. And we're like, that's lying. And she's like kind of shrugged and walk away. I'm like,
see what I'm saying? Like, those are things. So in lying in certain situations is not wrong. Like, lying under oath, wrong. Lying in a dark alley saying you're meeting a friend, not wrong. I feel like it's pretty easily distinguishable. So all of that to say, so it's like, I think that's how we measure everything. Like, in our house. And so far that's worked. for things of like, why shouldn't you, X, Y, Z. It's not a kind thing to do.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of how we gauge morality.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I definitely still teach my daughter, like, if you get scared at night, like, you can pray and, like, God will, comfort you or whatever. Because I feel like that's important. And I think regardless of, like, what you believe, I just think that people need something to believe in. You know what I'm saying?
So for you, it's like, for you, Christianity a lot hinges on the comfort.
The comfort, yeah.
Of it.
And I think, like, it's definitely more the spiritual side of it. And, like, how I feel in my heart, how it makes me feel. And that's kind of what guides me. You know what I mean? Whereas a lot of people are very, like, I feel like you're maybe more like, I need to see it proven.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely more like, but I feel the vibes, so we're good, And that's definitely like a testament to our personalities too, though.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, show me.
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah,
this does not add up.
Feeling that though. And so, but that's how I associate like Christianity. Really, it's just based off of like the feeling in my heart and like how that guides me.
So then let's talk about what made you change your, like, not change your mind, but what made you want to look at Christianity more introspectively and say,
so
like, is this what I think?
Yeah, I definitely had an aha moment of like talking to one of my really good friends. She grew up Jehovah's Witness, and Jehovah's Witness and Pentecostal are like a lot more lines than you'd think, which is interesting.
It is interesting because I wouldn't have thought that.
The religions don't really like get along.
Right.
Like each other thinks the other one's a cult, which they're both cults.
Right, so, they are. Let's just all
so it's just interesting
all religion
that
is cults. Let's just say that now.
Yeah, but like I didn't really know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses, and so when we started talking about it, like she would tell me things that they believe, and I'm like, yeah, we believe like a version of that. We believe, XYZ. And one day she's like, do you really believe that like there's a red devil in hell, like holding a pitchfork with like horns? And I just kind of like looked at her and I was like, damn, I believe that shit. And I'm like, yo, something's not right here. And I feel like that's when the light bulb went off. And that's when I was like, I need to do some research for myself. And that research really just looked like trying to separate myself. Like it was more so doing the work of trying to separate who I feel like growing up in the church made me to be as a person and like who I feel like I really am. Because I feel like I felt like I was kind of fighting between being who I felt like I needed to be as far as like the church went, and then who I felt like I really was.
Right. Same.
Yeah. So years of fighting, pushing the, who I really am down and being the person that I need to be to keep this appearance up at church, or to live this life that I feel like I'm being scared into living.
Yeah.
And so I was able to kind of just separate myself from that. And like I started reading the Bible and like thinking back on these lessons, and like even in going to church, like thinking about like these scriptures and these sermons, and like thinking like, I'm not sure that this interpretation is the right way, or like that doesn't feel right to me, a lot of things that were happening. And then that's when I kind of opened up the conversation like with my mom. Like we talked about it a little bit, and some stuff she did agree, like, yeah, that was crazy, like that's not something that was right. And so, it's crazy because I was talking to my mom a few weeks ago about it, and I came to the conclusion that I was like, I feel like I'm 34 years old trying to figure out what's right and wrong, according to whom, because so many people like growing up like jammed this one thought process and this one way of living into you. And now I'm like living that life, and I'm trying to like detangle all of it and like make this life something that I want to live for me, and not for all these people that made all these rules for how we should be living our lives.
Right. And I think like one thing that like as far as it goes to like why the right and wrong thing, because I feel like that's something that not only gets used a lot when people are starting to leave religions, any religion, there's like, what are you going to use for morality? It's like always, I feel like a response.
Yeah.
Like this is where we get our morals from. And I've heard that response to like multiple religions, not just Christianity. I think it's pretty common, but I think it's also reflective of how people feel leaving Christianity. Like, what do I think? What do I believe? What do I think is right? What do I think is wrong? Like what you said. Like,
yeah, and that was me. Like, spinning my wheels,
trying to figure out what's right and wrong, and that's exactly how I've felt for the past. Like, because for me, like, I think we've talked about this off mic, is that, like, you know, I think I'm a little bit further in the process, and I say further, and I don't mean that like a mean way. I just mean like I've been kind of thinking about this longer. So for me, it's really been like at least 2 years, maybe 3 at this point, that I've really been deep diving into this, and I still don't have, like, 3 years in, 2 years in, I still don't have, like, this is it, I found it, you know? I don't have that. But I think that was a large question for me too. Like, what do I think is right? What do I think is wrong? And one of the things I heard when I was listening to several different, you know, YouTubers on, like, deconstruction and stuff, is they were saying, like, for example, like, in another culture, let's say, let's use, like, India, for example, only because I know this one. So in India, in, like, slums and stuff, they don't have toilet paper. They use their left hand. And this is, like, a very common practice, right? And, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, if this is, you know, not a thing anymore, but it was when my dad went on a missions trip there. So this is my whole references from this. So he was saying it's even in affluent, because there's very rich, you know, neighborhoods and stuff in India, but culturally, like, you do not touch people with your left hand, even if you didn't wipe with it, right? Yeah. It's just culturally not acceptable. Like, you don't touch people with your left hand, you don't handle food with your left hand, you know, things like that. So you have someone coming from, say, that was raised in that culture, coming over to the US, just say, maybe they went to the UK, wherever, and that's not a thing, right? In other cultures, but they could still feel guilty and wrong, or feel wronged when someone touches them with their left hand, right? But is that wrong? Or was it something they were conditioned to believe was wrong, right? Yeah. No, did it come from a place that made sense? Yes, it did. For sure. But that was that was bred in them from birth, that this is wrong. And I think, like, a lot of Christianity, like, I'll hear a lot of people use kind of the argument of, like, if you feel, like, essentially questioning Christianity is wrong, that's God. And, like, or it's that I was literally conditioned as a child, like, you don't question God. Like, you don't question, you know, we do not know the ways of God, and, you know, stuff like that. And so I think that makes it kind of even harder for people that are in it to get out. Yeah. You know?
No, I can definitely see that. I think, and then especially when you, like, get in and you start talking about titles, and because we have, like, in the church that I grew up in, there's superintendents, and then there's, like, district leaders, because
I don't know anything about
all the churches are, like, broke up into little districts,
because you're all part of the same, like,
under the same umbrella of, like, one big church,
Pentecostal. Okay.
Yeah, one Pentecostal church, and there's a bunch of, like, different sections, like,
I didn't know that.
East Coast, West Coast, whatever. And within those sections, there's leaders within those sections.
So kind of, like, I know a little bit more about, like, Southern Baptist type structures, just because we had, like, a sister church that was Southern Baptist. So our church was not, but that's interesting. So that's kind of like how they have that too. They have, like, deacons, and then they
exactly.
Then they have, like, you know, this person's over this area kind of.
And it's very much so, like, a fight to the top. Like, it's very political. Ugh, it's very much like, how fast can I get this title behind my name? And, like,
are women allowed in Pentecostal churches to hold titles, or no?
They are, but not like bishop or anything like that. Like, that's always a man.
Are pastors women or no?
I don't believe. I know they're a little bit more lenient on them being pastors. I don't believe there's any women that pastor, like, a church.
That's what I mean.
Like, they'll let them be, like, an associate pastor, but I can't
That's
recall.
What I meant, like a lead pastor.
Yeah, I don't think there's any women that like lead a church. I mean, imagine so.
Even in, like, what I'll call mainstream Christianity, like, even these more, like, hip churches, like, that you have coming out now, even those are predominantly male. I mean, yes, you'll find a female pastor occasionally, but I would say that they're predominantly male.
Yeah, but it's just, like, it definitely becomes all about, like, how high can I go, and, like, Yeah, so it becomes a bit of a show for sure.
I think there's a dynamic in any church though when it comes to like, I think we talked about, we want to do a whole episode on this, like the first family.
Yeah.
And when I say first family, if anybody doesn't know what that is, that's essentially the pastor's family and their like kids and wife and all that, like literally like the fucking president of the United States. Like anyways, but yeah, but I feel like that happens in every church.
Yeah.
Around that.
Yeah, for sure.
So
yeah, it's
so crazy.
Very interesting. But yeah, so I feel like I'm definitely still on a journey to like figure it out. And I feel like I read the Bible, like I won't say like I seek counsel, but like, I talk to my mom about it. I think it scares her to think about one of her kids questioning this religion that she agrees with so deeply,
right? And
so I feel like it makes her uncomfortable. Like I think she really gets like genuinely scared for my soul,
right?
When I start asking questions or saying like this is like, maybe that's not, like she just does not want to hear it, and she almost just like won't let me talk about it.
That's
and
hard.
It's sad because like I don't know, it's tough.
No, I get what you're saying. Like, so for my family, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about the family aspect of it, because that's a big portion, and I think a lot of people stay in just because of that, right? And because of the familial pressure, or like the not wanting to disappoint your parents, right? Because like for me, like I think if my dad told me he was disappointed in me, like I would go and kill myself. I don't know what it is. Like my mom could tell me, it's okay. That's nothing new, but
not Joey.
Yeah, not my dad. So I get that, but so like with my family, they know we don't go to church, but like that's pretty much the extent of it. Like but they kind of almost like purposefully steer away from the topic too, because like sometimes they'll I could think that they can feel it going down that road of us being like, we don't subscribe to any of this, but we have not like straight talked about it. So now I'm also not as close with my family as you are with yours. Like you're really close with your mom, especially. Like so I've never, like my dad I feel like I'm close to, but not in the like let's have deep conversations way. Like, hey dad, look at my business plan. Like that's our conversations. It's not like the same. So anyways, but and I think that they know. And the reason is because anytime my kids go to their house, which is not often, but if they do, all of a sudden they come back and they're like talking about Jesus and stuff. I'm like, girl, you ain't ever been to church. Like, what you know about Jesus? Like they come back and talking about all this stuff, and I'm just like it's kind of annoying. But yeah, so that's kind of, I think they know, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But I think that would be my parents too. Like, I think that the thing that's hard is I know that they believe 100% that if I say I'm not a Christian, that I am going to hell.
Yes.
And they 100% will believe that I will be separated from them and separated from God for all of eternity and burn in a lake of fire. Yeah. Like, and so I think the hard part for me, and the reason I'm like, it would almost be cruel to inflict that pain purposefully. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I feel
because
that.
I know they would feel genuine pain over it.
Like
because they would
my mom would be devastated.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's almost a kindness to not like duke it out with them and say,
it's not worth it.
Right, because I'm like, I know they're not going to change their stance. And I'm not, I can't say I'm not ever going to, I have, but like, but this is the path that I've chosen at this moment. Yeah. And so it's just like, I'm not going to stray from like this discovery that I'm doing at this time. So it's like, why? What good would it do? Now, yours is a little different because you talk shit out with your mom. Like, that's different. I don't mean like you're being mean to your mom, but
yeah, no.
That's kind of how I feel about my parents. Because like I think my dad would just be heartbroken.
Yeah, and my mom would be so sad.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad too. I'm sure they both would be really, really upset. And like, And that's the thing, like you said, it's almost like I just don't want to talk about it. Like,
yeah,
I've set some pretty clear boundaries just in my life, not really surrounded around like religion until recently. Like, and so now, and I've had to like include that in those boundaries of like, okay, so we're just not gonna talk about this because you're not gonna agree with me, I'm not gonna agree with you, and I'm not gonna fight with you.
Yeah.
What I'm not gonna do is fight with somebody on the phone that I can hang up. So let's just set these boundaries and let's abide by them. And I just like, if you're not abiding by my boundaries, then like I just won't have communication with you.
So good. I am like terrible.
I think it's the Gemini in me.
I am like I am terrible at like I in my mind have boundaries. Like in my mind I'm like, you're crossing my boundaries, but I'm really bad at like communicating those out.
Yeah.
So I don't like, especially when it comes to my parents, like I'm really bad at that. So I need you to teach me how to set intentional boundaries. I need like a class. Oh my god. Yeah. It's a whole thing. Like, I think the family part makes it really, really difficult. And I know, like, for us, so when we say, like what you're saying, so we do the similar thing. Like, we have very, polar opposite political views as my family. And, my husband will sometimes try and, like, get into it. I'm like, just don't. It's not.
Don't poke the bear.
We're not getting into this fight. They're not going to agree with us. We're not going to agree with them. Let them do and think and vote the way that they do. And just keep on. Let's just get through this dinner. That's fine.
And I think, like, as far as my parents' like political views, like, I think they're very much so like, this is right, this is wrong. But they also have a respect for people in a sense of like, this is right and wrong for me, but like, you kind of do your own thing, like you're gonna be like, for them, like they like to say, you have to answer to the Lord for yourself. And that's kind of how they like, you just do your thing. But this is like, yes, it's wrong, but like I shouldn't have to. I shouldn't be able to tell you that you can't do it because you don't want to.
Yeah.
So, but
yeah, it's not my parents. I wish it is not. So with that, I think that's all we have for today.
Yeah, for sure.
And we will be back. And hopefully, everybody finds some. I don't know.
Anything, just a little humor.
Yeah. A little bit of.
Yeah.
All right. Till next time.
Out.